Well, this is Cyversity Engage. This is the Impact Interview Series, and today is Wednesday the 25th, 1 p.m. on the East Coast. What is that? No, 12 o'clock in Austin and other times thereafter. Today we're going to be speaking with here on the Cyversity Impact Interview Series. Today we're going to be speaking with Shamla Naidoo. She is the head of cloud strategy and innovation at Netscope. We're going to be talking to her about her book, The Cyber Savvy Boardroom, Essentials Explained. And this is going to be an engaging, exciting conversation. It's interesting that happy to have Shamla here. She's also a ambassador with Cyversity and one of our leading proponents of our mission at Cyversity, and we're happy to have her here. Just some background about Cyversity. We're a mission-focused organization, and our focus is to achieve our mission. Rather, is to achieve the consistent representation of women, minorities, underrepresented minorities, veterans, and all those that are trying to find their way in cybersecurity, and do that through programs that are designed to promote diversity, inclusion, equity, education, and empowerment. So it's a very unique and broad and engaging mission. We're a membership organization, and with membership, there's our members typically invest $100 a year in their engagement or membership with Cyversity, and students invest $20 a year as a member of our organization. And like any organization that has members, we also have resources and benefits. In our case, we have chapters, double-digit chapters across the nation, membership benefits, scholarships, on-demand training, events such as the national conference that's coming up a couple of days from now, starting the 28th or 29th through the 30th in Orlando, and of course, networking events of every like and kind across the nation. We there's our monologue here for our national conference that's coming up, and we hope many of you can join us there. We also I'm also featuring the fact that Austin, Texas, where I'm located, is launching our own chapter, and we're having a networking event tomorrow, the 26th, here in Austin, and you can scan that barcode there or that QR code there so that you can join and be a part of our event here in Austin starting at 6 o'clock tomorrow. A lot of the topic areas that we focus on are career development, career spotlighting, transitioning, leadership, and tech talk. And those things are key and core to Cyversity's mission. This month, October, is Cyber Awareness Month, and you can see that every month that is of note, we've focused our time and our efforts on those highlighted diversity highlights. And you can see coming up in November, it's Native American Heritage Month and Military Veterans Month. And in December, it's Disability Awareness Month. Our ground rules are very simple. This is about a 45-minute conversation. We're going to be focusing on the things that we've mentioned before, which are diversity, inclusion, and leadership. It's going to be a question and answer period, so you can put your questions in the chat so that we can get them answered by Shamla. And the session is being recorded, so it can be distributed on demand upon request, and it's also available on demand. And again, we're speaking with Shamla Naidoo and her book that she's written with her colleague Homira on board savvy engagements. Next month, we're going to be speaking with the incoming chairwoman for Cyversity, Sharon Burgess. She's currently the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for BDC Travel. And she's going to be our incoming chairwoman in 2024. And also in 2024, that's always blocked out there. We're going to be speaking in January with MK Palmore, who is also going to be our incoming president. He is currently works out of the Chief Information Security Officer at Google. I'm going to remove this so that we can get to our conversation. Oh, there you go. I did it well this time. I'm getting better at this. So Shamlith, welcome and thank you for joining us, and thank you for being a part of our Impact interview series. It's really good to see you again. Really good to speak with you, and looking forward to this conversation. But before we jump into that, I really wanted to just give you an opportunity to just give us some feedback, some background about you, how you've come to be the head of cloud strategy and innovation. That word innovation means a lot at Netscope, and just a little bit about your background, if you will. You're on mute too, so you can come off mute there.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Cyversity is near and dear to me, so I'm really happy to be here having this conversation. So a little bit about myself. I have spent 41 years in corporate technology jobs. The first half of my career I spent as a technologist, engineer, building networks, writing applications, creating AI programs, etc. The second 20 years I spent as a CISO in a number of large global organizations. And as I kind of looked to my semi-retirement portfolio, I started to build out kind of the perfect retirement portfolio, and that includes being the head of cloud strategy at Netscope. I have a couple of public company boards in my portfolio. I'm also a law professor. I teach emerging technology law and policy, and I teach global privacy law. And how I come to be here is this whole idea of innovation. I personally have had to reinvent myself, my skills, my profile multiple times in the 41 years to stay relevant and to be essential to this industry that has, given me so much career-wise. And so innovation for me is in my DNA. Reinvention is important to me. Staying, on the cusp of where technology is going and where the world is going to meet technology is important to me. So that's how I ended up here.
I'm on mute, just talking. I'm on mute, just talking away. Anyway, that was a really good introduction. Really appreciate that. If anyone is really looking to chart their path, that is a good example of how to get to where you are and where you've been, where you've come from, and where you've been and where you've come to. I'm going to attempt to tie that innovation title to this book because your ongoing work with industry leaders has brought this word innovation, which sometimes means conceptualizing a brand new reality, a new future reality. Is that what this book is proposing? Hey, listen, we're proposing to have a new innovative dialogue between boards, CEOs, and their security executives. Is that what you're attempting to do here?
So, at the root of this book is the idea that today CISOs have a really tough time when they go to the boardroom. They always bring presentations, they bring information, they try to engage with their boards. Almost always they leave the boardroom wondering, did I hit the mark? Did I address the issues and concerns of the board? Did I do well, etc.? And so, I think one of the challenges is that CISOs, have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of information, they have a lot of really good knowledge and wisdom to bring to the boardroom. The trouble is that it doesn't always land in a place where it can, grow. And so the idea for this book is that there's a lot of dialogue that happens outside of the boardroom. We now need to bring some of that dialogue into the boardroom. But to do that, there needs to be a foundational level understanding inside the boardroom on exactly how this topic relates to the company, the strategy, and most importantly, the board agenda. So the book was intended to create foundational level, essential level, basic level information for boards of directors so that when you, the CISO, goes into the boardroom, you can have a deeper, more meaningful dialogue with them. Instead of it being a one-way delivery of information, we want a two-way dialogue on the substance. We want boards to engage in deeper, more meaningful discussions with their CISO so that they truly understand the challenges both of the job, the challenges of the threat profile, the challenges of managing risk in this area.
Yeah.
Okay,
Static. Is it possible
yes,
for her to use a headset?
let me
Um,
let me do that. Let me do that. I think I can do that. Is
so I'll ask, are you guys hearing me clearly?
that any better?
Wow, much,
Okay.
much
All right.
better. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Sorry about that. And so I think, the goal for the book was to set down that foundational level knowledge for boards so that when the CISO shows up, they can engage in a meaningful dialogue. So today, here's how I see it. And then I've spent at least 20 years in the boardroom on the side where the CISO is providing updates to the board, right? So I was there delivering information. And what always happens is that we go in with a bunch of information, we go in with a presentation, we go through our material, we talk about all the important points. Sometimes the board will ask a question or two. Almost always, if they ask you a question, I would answer the question, and that would be the end of the conversation, right? Then if they have a question, um, I would then have to wonder, did I answer the question sufficiently?
Mhm.
And they won't be able to tell me. So one of the things that I do now is, we can engage in a dialogue, but it doesn't matter what information you're bringing to deliver to them. If they didn't understand the answer, the conversation is likely to stop. And
Mhm.
instead of going to the follow up question, what they often will do is they'll go to the second question, right? And we know that over the last couple of years, and I'd say in the last 2 years in particular, boards have been given long lists of questions from a lot of different companies, whether that's, their partners, their professional services firms, their auditors, etc. So they have long lists of questions. The NACD and every other organization has a list of questions that boards should ask their CISO. The problem with that is that they haven't always helped the board to understand the answer. So they have a list of questions. They can go from first question, ask you the question, you give them an answer. They go to the next question, you give them an answer, and that doesn't generate a dialogue. It just is a um, very linear way of ask a question, get an answer, and you almost don't know whether they understood the answer. And I will tell you that for the most part, most of them don't understand the answers because they're too technical. They presuppose a baseline level of knowledge that boards don't have. So that was the purpose of this book. And if I could add to that too, Dave, there's a lot of great writing out there. There's a lot of great articles and books and periodicals, etc., that exist for boards, and those are all very useful tools. The challenge is that each of them presupposes a foundational level of knowledge.
Right.
And so what this book will do is it'll give them the foundation, and all of that other useful information can then build upon their knowledge, creating a richer, more meaningful dialogue with boards and their CISOs.
Yep. I mean, first of all, boards, it's a great answer. And first of all, boards and CISO, CEOs and um, board members, they're really focused on what I would consider project to product engagement. They're just focused on the business. Their thought process or the things that they focus on are quote unquote broader than security, which we know is a critical part. Um, how much do board members have to know? And is this the development of sort of a new lexicon of language?
I don't believe it is new in any way. I think that boards, since the beginning of board time, have focused on risk and risk management. So if you think about the board agenda, they're looking at, does the business have a sound strategy? Is the strategy getting properly delivered by the right levels of engagement from the CEO and the executives in the company. And the big thing that they want to know is what's the risk in the strategy, and is someone actively taking care of mitigating and managing the risk. So risk management has been a forever goal of the board. They know how to do this. They manage risk in the financial statements. They manage risk with respect to performance and growth and customer engagement and succession planning. They really do get engaged in all kinds of risk management. I think the challenge with this topic is that we have created our own, like you described, lexicon. We have our own way of describing um, issues and concerns and risks and threats, and it ends up getting technical very quickly. And so one of the things that I think we have to do is start to actively think about our programs as another risk tool in the boardroom on the board agenda. So they manage risk forever, and everyone knows that risk is about you know you can only do your best to manage it. There's no zero sum game. Nobody expects you to get it right every single time. And so in the boardroom, risk management is a deep skill in every area. What we have to do now is we have to bring our security risk management and our cybersecurity management into the risk topic that they can have a discussion about. If we continue to keep it on the side and keep it technical, it's a little bit more challenging, more difficult for them to understand. And so they typically will think that this is different. But in the bigger scheme of things, it's not different.
And with them focusing on risk as due part of their due diligence and their fiduciary sort of care duty.
So I think you're asking about the board's engagement in executing their fiduciary obligations, which is to make sure that the company has a risk management plan and that they can actually identify the risks and then mitigate them or manage them, and someone needs to own the action to reduce the risk. So yes, they have a fiduciary obligation. They always have. This is a legal obligation for boards. And so that's, in my opinion, um, not changing. In fact, it's just getting exacerbated. It's now focused more on including cyber in the big risk management picture, not just dealing with the risks that we know about. So I think Dave just dropped off. I think he's going to join back in a minute. So in the meantime, let me continue the conversation. As we kind of talked about the purpose of this book, one of the things that I think I will share. So hopefully people can hear me. One of the things that I would share with people is that, this book was intended for board directors. The reason why we're making it available to people like you who are practitioners is sometimes you need to know what your boards are reading, and it is helpful to, Dave, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome back. And so I was trying to just answer the question, or at least just to cover the topic on, why are we making this book available to people who are not directors on boards? Because it's helpful to know what your boards are reading, right? We've had a huge number of requests for the book from board directors, sitting board directors. I was just at the NACD conference, and everyone I talked to wanted the book. And so we handed out a lot of the books. But it's helpful for you as a practitioner to know what they're reading, because that helps you to prepare for your discussion. And if you know what they're reading, you're likely going to know how to prepare to answer the questions that they might have. So this is a useful resource. And of course, we can make it available. So I just wanted to kind of cover that. Why is this helpful? You're not all board directors. Some of you may be, but if you're not a board director, it's just helpful to know, because CEOs are also reading this book. Remember, most of them in public companies are also on their board, so they are board member. And your CEO might have a question, or they might ask a question of the executive leadership team. And so it's just helpful for you to be prepared to know what that dialogue is happening in the background. Over to you, Dave. Okay, so I think Dave will rejoin. I'll just continue the conversation. I think the one thing that, for all of you who are practitioners need to know is that metrics are a really important conversation. Metrics conversations are happening all over boardrooms, all over the US. And frankly, I think this is happening across the globe. And remember, we have distributed our book across the globe. So, I think it's important to recognize that there are some operational level metrics, and definitely people need to know what those mean, right? So executives are going to want to know what that means. But operational level metrics are things that you collect to demonstrate that your program is running as efficiently as you can get it. One of the things that we have done in the book is listed those out, because remember that in the boardroom, they are typically committees, and the committees are the working groups of the board. Right? So for example, I'm on all three of my public company boards. I am on the audit committee. And the audit committee is the working group where it's a subset of the board. We actually start to look more detailed. We look, at a little bit more of the operations, even though the board is not responsible for the operations. We look at the operations of the company. We look at the risks of the company, and then we will take some perspective and give some opinions to the board, the full board, on what we think, right? And so the audit committee is very commonly the place where metrics are discussed in detail, especially cybersecurity metrics, risk management metrics, and any kind of threat profile. Those conversations will happen in detail at the audit committee. At the board level, it's a little bit abstracted. It's a slightly higher level, but that's how you should think about metrics. And so metrics are a very important construct when you're communicating with your board. Why? Because for the most part, they know you're there. They know the security teams and the security leaders are doing their jobs. The metrics actually show us that you're getting the results, and then it helps you to interpret the results for us and tell us about what's working, what's not working, where you're going to do more, where you're going to do less, etc. So really importantly, I think the metric section is there's an operational metric section, which, as I just described, will usually happen at a more working level, but it's helpful to have data, because if you have data, you come into the boardroom, you're a whole lot more credible about, you doing your job. And so it's important, I think, that you think about operational level metrics as the credibility that you bring to support your position, to support your decisions, to support your requests. So the metrics actually help us to determine the efficacy of your security program. It also helps us determine the credibility of the leader. Right? Are you just saying stuff because it's fashionable and because it's kind of the buzzword of the month? Or are you saying stuff, are you bringing conversations to the boardroom that are grounded in data that makes you a whole lot more credible. It makes you a whole lot more reliable, I think, in terms of your position. Right? It's supportive. It doesn't have to be entirely accurate. Right? So we're looking for directional decision making. We're looking for, does the data vaguely support your position? Does it vaguely support your decisions? And so the other thing to think about is at a board level, though, the metrics have to be abstracted, has to be at a slightly higher level. And so what does that mean? You have to take the metrics, connect the dots, determine what's the business impact, what's the business outcome, and you have to be able to describe it to the board from a business perspective. So, they are interested in things like culture. Do we have the right security culture? So, what are those things in your operational metrics that are going to aggregate into this position of, you know, um, let me tell you what our security culture is. Let me tell you that everyone here is doing the right thing, thinking about the right things, thinking about things the right way, acting in the most appropriate, ethical way, etc. So, think about how to take your operational level metrics. You do have to provide those, but you do have to interpret them so the board can kind of understand that at a higher level. So, what's the culture of the company? What's the threat profile? You might have a lot of different items that come from your operational metrics that help you to determine the threat profile of the company. You want to describe the threat profile and ground it in the fact that you have some data to support this position. And so things like that we have in the book made two separate sections. One is an operational level metric section, one is a board level metric section. And it really helps, I think, for practitioners to take the data that they have from an operational perspective, to take the reporting that they have, convert it into board level metrics and describe it. But you have to describe it, the board is interested in assessing the culture, the threat profile, what does the asset looks like? What do the technical assets look like? Where are they? Do we have a good handle on our third parties? Do we know, do we know all the people in that ecosystem, for example? So it's really important that you think about the metrics, not just as operational level metrics, because if you just report those, they have no idea what to do with it. So as the expert, you have to connect the dots, bring both the metrics, describe it as a board level metric using the operational level perspective.
And using the language that they really understand, since it's their language is more business prone rather than technical prone. Is this assessment that the board members are looking at? Is it a technical assessment, or does it have the business attributes of here's how we're going to sort of save or protect our crown jewels, and it gives you the specific and detailed approaches as to how they're going to save their crown jewels or protect their crown jewels?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because that's exactly what a board wants, right? They are focused on the business strategy, and the risks to the business strategy are important because it says the business strategy is going to deliver the results that were promised. If you go to them and you share with them how the cybersecurity threat could, impact that business strategy, suddenly you have different ears, right? They're listening harder. They're listening because now they can connect the dots with what's important to them and what's important to, what's important to them in terms of decision making. What should they change, and how should they execute their obligations and their fiduciary duties to the shareholders? And so to do that, they need to know where the risks are. So what you have to do is figure out, what's the risk you bring, and they'll be operational, they'll be technical, but that has to be translated into what impact does this have on the business? That's what they really want to know about, because that they understand. It's also their job to know, and it's their job to then assign the responsibility for fixing those to somebody in the company to make sure that someone in the organization is handling it well.
Sure. When you're looking at the future, and most of these executives, board members, and CEOs are looking at the future, when you look to the future, what and them designing and creating new ways of developing and generating revenue. How do you inform them in a way that they can understand about the challenges and the types of surface attacks that they're opening up with with these new strategies? How do you help them see? How do you help these board members see the challenges that they're about to face going down a particular road?
So I will tell you that there are two discussions that need to happen, right? The first is the innovation and the business opportunities have to be on the table, right? Because that has to come first.
Mhm.
Before the security team says, oh, if you do that, these are going to be all the risks. You know what? As business leaders, they understand that there's going to be risk. What they really want to do is to say, let me first assess the size and the size of the opportunity. If I can do that, then I can decide somebody needs to tell me what the risks are. I will then assess the size of the risk and decide, is this business opportunity worth this risk? Every risk doesn't stop the strategy. Some risks you just absorb it and you go. We all know we're going to get in a car accident. We still get out in our cars every day and we go somewhere. Right? And so that's the risk management piece is, I know there's a risk, but yes, I'm going to continue down this risk. So I'm going to take the risk. And what I'm going to do is look for opportunities to, I would say, transfer the impact to someone else. So, for example, I will invest in all kinds of controls so that the risk is transferred from the business outcome to a security leader who's going to take care that these things don't happen so the risk does not materialize. If it materializes, I'm going to buy insurance. I'm going to make sure that the insurance is going to cover me and make me whole. And so there's all kinds of discussions that need to happen from a risk management perspective. And so CISOs really have to have that discussion. The business risk is important. The operational risk, not so much. But aggregate operational risk can still tank your strategy. And so CISOs have to think about, how do I take those, constructed in a way that's meaningfully business impactful, and then describe it.
Okay, operational risk, not so much. Dig into that just a tiny bit more.
So if you think about, why do we hire large teams of people? We hire large teams of people. We hire enterprise risk management. We hire all kinds of controls people, first line of defense, second line of defense, third line of defense, right? We hire a very large set of people with skills to help mitigate the operational risk, because those are the ones we know about. Typically, an operational risk is saying, my business runs this way today. Here's a particular area where there may be a failure or potential for failure. How am I going to mitigate that failure? So operational risks are known risks. What's needed is the execution to mitigate or handle and manage those risks.
The unknown
The
future.
innovation side, though, is a little more complex because you don't always know you don't know enough about the opportunity. Never mind knowing enough about the risk, because who knows what the risk is going to be of AI. We think we know, we working toward that, but we don't really know. And so from a board perspective, the things we don't know are the things that are going to impact our strategy in far more serious ways. So that's how we think about, how should we engage in the innovation discussion? And we do, because that is a board level imperative, right? We
Mhm.
have to make sure we're creating shareholder value. And the way we create shareholder value is by doing new things or doing old things in new ways and bringing value to our consumers and customers, etc. And so the innovation piece, I think, is a much more complex risk management conversation to have. But remember that, you as a cybersecurity leader can lead those conversations in the boardroom because you are the expert.
Expert. You are the expert. Exactly. And is this conversation also leaning to helping board members understand and accept risks and say, okay, that's a risk I should take because we're going to win anyway. But help me do that.
So
taking that risk on as
interestingly,
part of the process.
yeah, boards are not going to say to you, I accept that risk, right? In fact, I would be hard pressed to find any particular person on this call or otherwise whose CEO has said to them, I will accept that risk. And so at an executive level, risk is nuanced, right? We think about risk in a very much a binary way. It's you have risk or you don't have risk. This is how much the risk is. You accept it or you don't. And as you get higher up in the organization, risk becomes a lot more nuanced. Right? Everyone knows that there's a risk to doing business. Everyone knows there's a risk to economic downturns. Every CFO knows there's a risk, but they don't just kind of stop doing. They continue recognizing that the risk in the role in the economy, for example, is inherent. Right? And so at the board level, we understand risk. That's what we do. Right? One of our primary jobs is to not to manage the risk, but to oversee the risk and make sure that the management team, the executive team, are managing the risks aggressively to the level of tolerance that we and the executive teams have set. And that risk usually is not $50 billion is a risk. It's a lot more nuanced, but just remember that at a board level, the risk is understood, the risk is recognized. And so while they may not accept the risk in that kind of binary way, there's an inherent risk that is applied to everything we do. So when we look at the strategy, we're looking at what could make that strategy fail, what could make the strategy, um, you know, mildly successful. And then we say, well, is it worth going down that road? And we may support it or not. Remember, the board's role is to endorse the strategy. So when we look at a strategy, we can say we endorse this without question, or we can say we endorse this with some kind of condition, and we delegate those kinds of conditions and actions to different executives in the company, mostly the CEO, but to any other executive in the company. So it's really important that we don't go in with these binary questions of accept this risk or not. Right? Because when you do that, you set people on their heels and they get a little anxious about, oh my gosh, now I'm accepting the risk. And remember that in organizations, risk actually gets distributed across the entire executive team. No one person sits with all of the risk of failure. And so one of the things we have to do is make sure when we're talking about this topic that we recognize there's risk in every business unit. There's risk in every technology function. There's risk in every, process, workflow in a company. And there's cyber risk anywhere you touch a digital asset, whether that's data, any kind of device, or any kind of, uh, workload, or any kind of SaaS services, etc. We need to recognize that we shouldn't hold all of the risk. Right? And the idea about engaging with a meaningful dialogue in the boardroom is to have that opportunity to share with them that the security risk doesn't start and end with the CISO, that the security risk is distributed all around the company, that the CISO is kind of the shepherd of that risk. We look at it, we assess it, we size it up, we manage it, we take action, we advise others to take action, we educate people on what action to take, for example. But we don't own it all. And the same way, we shouldn't try to distribute it all to one person. Because remember that, in the digital world, there's enough to go around, and we are the stewards of the cybersecurity risk.
Sure.
But it is owned. It's owned across the organization. In a I would say in a pretty meaningful way, and very many times the CISO will talk about this, take it upon themselves to own the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing good that comes out of that, because every failure that happens in the company will then end up on the CISO's desk. And yet, every success that happens in business ends up going to the business desk.
Right, right. It is a
It
shared
doesn't seem fair to
responsibility.
me.
Yep, it is a shared responsibility. Yeah, first of all, I got to apologize. I've set up in a whole new, different place today, and it's really challenging, especially with the inclement weather here. Let me ask a question about books and summits and seminars.
Okay. I didn't hear the full question, but um, he asked about books and summits and seminars. So let me just try to see if I can cover that, very quickly. So boards need to learn. Remember, most of them historically, boards of directors were made up of people who were retired, mostly CEOs that were retired from an operating job and now just sit on boards, right? So you can be relevant for a significant amount of time, but the fact is that, at some point, you're going to have to um, build skills because the world will change, the technology will change, people will innovate more. So we really need to make sure that the board directors are continuously learning. The most important and valuable place that they can learn is from you. You are the operating executive. They can learn from you about what's changing in the world. So don't lose that opportunity uh, from actually educating them because you are their most valuable resource. Now they go to conferences, they can go read books, read magazines, etc. And a lot of them do. But I think, my own experience has been the best learning comes out of your own boardroom from your own operating executives because you can ask whatever question you want. One of the things you'll find that's common is that they will learn in the boardroom from you. Then they'll go to the next board that they're on and they will ask similar questions and they'll build on their knowledge there. And by the time they come back around to your board meeting, they'll have take your information and they'll have added to it a whole bunch of things that they've collected along the way. And they'll start asking you questions that you don't recognize anymore. And so remember that, you are the most valuable resource for learning. Of course, whenever you find a resource, it's helpful to share it with them, whether that's an article, a magazine, a podcast, a book, etc. But, don't forget that you are a great source of information simply because you're current, you're in the operating role, the changes are happening to you. And so, take advantage of that opportunity. Dave, you back? Okay. So while Dave is coming back, let me just pose a question. For those of you who are on the chat, feel free to put questions in there. I'm happy to take any question. Nothing is off base. Um, but let's just talk about any topic you want to talk about. Dave, do you have a question you want to put out there?
Yeah, what I did want to ask about is the future and how does this all pertain to the future conversations between board members, their shareholders, who they are representing and protecting as well. How does this represent to the future of their security and the security of the company and the assets that they're trying to protect? Where does this all end up at in terms of the future? We know that there's no zero sum. We know that it's not 100% of any of this, but how does this end up in the future?
Yeah, that's really very relevant right now, right? Because everyone is talking about ChatGPT, everyone is talking about AI, everyone is talking about this topic. And so one of the reason we wanted to write the book is anything that's digital is going to impact the um, the future. It's going to impact the boardroom. It's going to impact companies. And but the thing is that we cannot keep dealing with innovation in such a linear way, right? Because yesterday it was cloud, today it's ChatGPT and AI, tomorrow it's going to be quantum, and the next day it's going to be something else. And the thing we cannot do is keep creating all of these, major like dialogue and call to actions and changing strategy. And, what we need is a foundation that says all things digital will change quickly. All things digital will create a cybersecurity risk or risks. The threat profile will change. The attackers will change. Their methods will change. But the one thing that's going to be constant is our digital estate is still going to be under attack.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's AI or ChatGPT, whether it's cloud, whether it's quantum computing, anything else that might come through in the future, we need boards to be knowledgeable enough to understand that things will change. The foundation is going to stay. Right? So that's how I would think about the the future. Now, boards are going to be held to account because the future and innovation in particular is going to help them to create business value for the shareholders. If you say, well, I'm not going to touch innovation so I can stay safe, they're not really going to create growth in that exponential way that shareholders want. So they're going to have to get far more involved, far more engaged in innovation topics and in digital in particular, because that's the way of the future. Right?
Sure.
And so the future, I think, is going to be digital. Boards have to get engaged. They're going to be held accountable for making sure that we don't leave opportunity and money on the table.
Right.
So if you don't embrace innovation, you're going to leave money and opportunity on the table. And I don't know that they can, continue to kind of protect themselves in that way. So they're going to have to get involved in the innovation conversations, making sure that, they are probing the management team sufficiently to make sure that they are embracing innovation, that they are adopting innovation, that they are at least, proving out the innovation and how it can work, etc. So I think the future is bright for digital, bright for security, because that's going to ensure, that we're always going to have to be on our toes. But the more we do to protect our technology estate, the less the board has to worry, because we're just going to show up there with our story, which is the threat profile has changed. Here's what's changed. Here's what I'm doing about it. I got it covered. We're done. And they hopefully at that point will understand it.
And understand and ask questions. So in the future, should the board member be looking for the security team to be more offensive minded in terms of their defense, right? Instead of just saying, I'm just going to wait for everything to come to me to see how I'm going to protect it. I mean, I think in security, the CISOs and the security agents, they're the same coin on a different side. One is an activist, and one is an activist, and with all the challenges associated with that, and the other one is ethical. So they think the same way, and they think the same way, and they operate in somewhat the same way. But should we be more like the hacktivists and the bad actors and the challenging individuals, enemy, if you will? Should we be more like them and be more aggressive?
Well, look, if you think again, this is a risk conversation, right? If you can engage in a deeper dialogue with your board, you can have that conversation, which is, here's some opportunities, here's some attacker. That attacker is going to attack us. Should I attack them back? Or should I be proactive in attacking them? I'm not sure that anyone will want to take that risk, because, that's like being the first one that kind of, you pull out your gun first, and then, you create a whole lot of drama that actually comes after that. And so I think that the thing that's going to define whether we hack back is going to be based on your value system in the company. And so you have to know what your values are, right? But if you keep just playing defense and you wait until someone attacks you and you respond to the attack, but you respond by doing your own investigation, cleaning up the mess, getting rid of the bad guy, etc., and there's no penalty to pay, they can just keep coming back at you, right? And so those are conversations that need to be had in the boardroom of what are those opportunities? Where can you do this? How would you do it? What rules and laws will it violate or break? Right? And so you really need to have that deeper dialogue. Today, if you look at cybersecurity leaders and their board agenda, it's, I did these projects, I did this phishing attack, and so many people responded, and here's the projects that I'm going to do next year, etc. A lot of the projects are defensive, and it's absolutely right. We do need to have a very high maturity defensive posture. That's an opportunity to engage with the board that says, I can also do these other things.
Mhm.
Would you support that? Would you endorse that? And, here are the things that could go wrong. And, make sure that you're having at that point a risk discussion, not a cybersecurity risk discussion, but a business risk discussion.
Right.
Okay?
So, yeah, I know we're close to the time, and I
I think we lost Dave again. So why don't I just kind of continue down that thread? So, there are opportunities to engage. What I would advise everyone on this call, make sure that you are
time
engaging
being
with. Sorry, go ahead, Dave. I lost you for a bit.
this is incredible. This is painful. I'm in absolute pain here. So I want to ask anyone in the audience, do you have any questions? I've got a lot more, but I am just in pain going in and out of this conversation. It's a good thing that I talk to you enough to know what you're saying and know how you approach these things. But I do want to say to you, Shamla, thank you very much for the time that you spent with the folks here today. And if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. This is where she can see them and hear and answer them ably. I think it's a great time to hear you talk about the conversation that board members and board directors need and should have with their security executives. That conversation, in many cases, if it's not had, can be disastrous. It can be extremely challenging for the organization, and that's where we lose. That's where we lose our fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders and our customers. And then those three things come into play: that financial hit, that legal hit, and of course that reputation hit. So I know we're at time, and I don't see any questions coming up into the chat. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds for anyone to ask a question. But in the meantime, Shamla, thank you again. Any parting pearls of wisdom or any parting recommendations over and above what you've already said that you'd like to offer?
The only thing I would say is, and I noticed Dwight actually kind of restated, if you don't embrace innovation, you're leaving money on the table. Just remember that when companies adopt innovation, the cybersecurity perspective, the cybersecurity controls, the risk management actions are a cost of that money that's on the table, right? So if they're going to benefit from the innovation, then they need to spend the money on protecting it. It's the cost of doing business, and they have to offset the cost of the upside with the protection of that strategy. So, I would say I don't think you need to make excuses. I don't think you have to go with a begging bowl. I think that you have to make compelling business cases for the fact that innovation brings a lot of upside, and to recognize the upside. Some amount of money, some amount of investment has to be made to recognize the upside, and that's the cost of doing security business,
Right.
cybersecurity business. So I would just say, make sure that you tie your protection initiatives, your defensive initiatives to the innovation and the adoption and the speed of the innovation,
Hmm.
because if they don't pay now, they'll pay later. And you have to be able to make the business case with both of those perspectives. You shouldn't have to like make excuses for doing something different in your security program. It's necessary. You didn't create the problems that exist. Adopting the innovation and taking the money and the revenue that comes with those opportunities have created some of the challenges you have. So, I would say don't be bashful about asking for what you need, because you're not changing the business. They are.
That's right. There's a question in the chat there. Is it challenging to communicate the risk of insider threat, a serious threat, to the board? Is there a challenge in communicating that to the board?
I think it is. I think there is a challenge because we assume that the people we hire are the people we know and trust and want to be there, etc. So they must do their jobs the way they're supposed to. The way I would do it is I would say, what is the threat profile? Where are the attackers? Who are the people that are going to compromise our environment, our digital estate, our data, etc.? Then I would break that up into categories, because these attackers, some of them come from outside, some of them come from other countries, some of them come from other companies, some of them come from inside our own company. They're just another attacker profile. So an insider threat to me is not someone that's coming from someone who's trusted. They are just a different category of an attacker. They just happen to be in a more beneficial place where they can be more successful. And so, without, because we, of course, don't name names, but we certainly need to categorize them as attackers who are inside the organization. When we say insider threat, that can often leave, leave someone with a vision of, oh, all these people should hold hands and play nice. And so, I would just make clear on who are those insiders, what kinds of people fall into that category, what kinds of things they can do, how easy they can do it, and how harmful that can be.
Sure. Insider threat is just as bad as exterior threat. It causes the same damage nonetheless, right? So here's a question here's the question: what technique do you use to manage communicating technical information sharing to the business, and how do you avoid that rabbit hole of focusing on being too technical?
So when you go down the rabbit hole and you're having a technical discussion, you will recognize it in the boardroom. You will recognize it, or even with executives, because you'll be having a one-on-one conversation versus everyone kind of listening to you, nodding, shaking their heads, agreeing, making either physical gestures or verbal gestures. So when you go down the rabbit hole, the idea is to quickly try to get out of it. You don't just keep going then, because the more you explain, the more technical it gets, because that's where we are most comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you have to do is to go, you have to exit the conversation elegantly without making them feel like you're not going to answer their question, is to say, you know what, that's an important question. It deserves a thoughtful answer. Let me go away, think about it, and I'll get back to you with a more thorough answer. When you get down a rabbit hole, what I would do is I would take your explanation to somebody else in your organization and say, let's say the head of HR or somebody in your finance team, and go, hey, if I explain this, like, this is the question, if I give you this answer, would you understand it? You have to role play with other people in safer environments, and not people who know and understand your language, but people who don't. But if you are already in the boardroom and that happens, exit that conversation elegantly but quickly. Because remember what happens when you leave the room, the conversation we have is, oh my gosh, can you believe that's what Bobby said, or that's what Mary said? Is that the right leader for this company at this point in time? Because what they do is they judge you, the person, not you, the message. So I would say, if you ever get in that situation, exit it pretty quickly, but promise to provide an answer, either in writing or a follow-up discussion, and then practice before you go do it. The conversation in the boardroom should never be technical.
Gotcha.
Unless you're a technology company with a technology board.
There you go. Look, we're at time because I know you've got a dead stop or hard stop, and I don't want to overextend ourselves here to you. But we really appreciate the time that you've spent here to talk about your book, the Cyber Savvy Boardroom, the Essentials Explained. We also appreciate you coming on the Cyversity's program. You are an ambassador of ours, and we really, truly appreciate your time and your engagement. And we're really happy to have you as part of our team at Netscope. And so it's great to see you. I apologize again profusely for being in a very weak position, but you know what? Weakness always, before strength, there's weakness, and then you become very strong again. So I'm happy to have engaged.
Dave,
Yeah,
thank you for having me. I appreciate it. If anybody wants a copy of the book, a free copy of the book, have them reach out to you. Just send them the link. They can download it. It's available to all of you. Knowledge is not useful if it's not shared. This is me sharing knowledge.
there you go. And that's our last statement. Thanks you all very, very much. Hey, Carlos, if you just will reach out to me, I'm going to can I put my, I am in such pain. I can't believe how much pain I'm in here. But anyway, go on LinkedIn. You'll see David Elcock on LinkedIn.